Welcome to another episode of the Seven Figure Educator Podcast. I am so excited and grateful to have with us Tommy Traffic, aka Tommy Powers, who is an OG in the marketing game, has supported a lot of the businesses that we've known and has helped many businesses scale through traffic. And so during this episode, we're actually going to dive into paid traffic. We're going to talk about what might it look like if you're just starting with paid traffic, if you kind of dibbled and dabbled in ads, or whether you've already been running ads and you're trying to take it to the next level. We're going to unpack strategies just for you in this episode. So let's go ahead and jump in. First off, thank you so much, Tommy, for being here. I'm super excited for folks to be able to learn from you. So I first just want to start off with your experience, because I don't know how you feel about this term, but you're OG in the game, where I'm
I'm in terms of endearment.
Okay,
I like them all. Like, I don't really, as long as you ain't talking junk, you can call me whatever you're comfortable. I like that.
Okay. So I first want to show respect and homage to just, your leadership in the industry and your experience, and want to make sure that folks know and understand your experience before we jump into the conversation. You just ain't start this yesterday.
True
and
that.
so if you could, first off, how long have you been in the marketing world?
2007. So I bought my first ad on Google in 2007. I was doing like some stuff before that, but I kind of really stumbled into Google ads 2007, and I kind of been, doing that lane ever since. Media buyer, is what most people, I feel like I'm way more than that now, but at the time, that's kind of was the career path. Once I decided, oh yeah, I'm gonna be doing this. Oh, they call this a media buyer. Okay, cool. I'm gonna be that, and I want to be great at that.
Okay, so 2007. So we're closer to 20 years than not.
Yeah.
In this space.
Don't tell them how old I am. I saved all the gray hair.
That wasn't gonna be my next question. I wasn't gonna go there, but I think that's fascinating, because particularly in a lot of this online space, you have a lot of new people who are popping up, and new ad agencies, that you've really been able to kind of see the marketplace transition a lot over the last, almost 20 years in terms of what media buying looks like. So you started with YouTube ads, and what made you start there? Because were YouTube ads, and forgive me because I don't know the answer to this, were Facebook ads like prevalent kind of media buying space then, or was it mostly YouTube?
When I first started, it was Google.
Okay.
Well, YouTube was a thing, but YouTube ads wasn't a thing much, and it wasn't something I was doing. So think about Google search. So you search on Google, you see those ads. So that's kind of where I started. And then I got introduced to Google display. It's called Google Display Ads now, where basically you can place ads on other people's websites. So if you've ever been on somebody's website, they say ads by Google. That's kind of where I found success. And that was the first, 4 or 5 years on Google, was basically search and display, mostly display, because I ended up getting pretty good at that. I didn't touch YouTube ads until about 2012. I bought my first Facebook ad probably around 2009, probably like when the platform first came out. I tinkered around on there. I didn't get really serious about it for a few years, but back at them days, any way you could buy an ad on the internet, I was trying to do it. You know what I mean? And so, but Google, display just kept being a thing. And then eventually when I got into YouTube, I guess because I had done so much with Google, because it's under the Google umbrella, it just, I don't know what it is, but Google has always been kind of like my number one platform. So I don't know if they answer your question, but that's kind of the, timeline, if you will.
Right. No, that totally answers my question. And so when you're saying media buyer, can you kind of explain what that means for people? Because that's actually, I was familiar with ads, but the first time I heard that term was actually through you. I was like, oh, that does make sense. I was used to hearing like ad agency. So when you say media buyer, can you just kind of break that down for folks what that means?
So to me, again, this is me saying that. An ads person, a lot of people can be an ads person. To me, a media buyer, that's like a career. It's like, that's what it's not like, you can do ads in your spare time, but a media buyer, like they wake up and go to bed. That's the lane. It's almost like a basketball player, like you got a guy that plays in the NBA or even college guys now, because they making a lot of money, right? Their whole life revolves around that versus like,
Like
some
pickup.
guy, he gonna do pickup or whatever the case may be. Like both of them play basketball, but they not the same. You know what I'm saying? So to me, a media buyer is a more serious level of that, where somebody decide I'm gonna be, this is gonna be my career. I'm gonna revolve my business or my job around this idea of strategizing and figuring out how to place advertising and running campaigns and that sort of thing. So I don't know how much sense that make, but
Makes total sense.
if you look it up, it ain't gonna see that, but that's just kind of how I look at it.
That makes total sense. And so just to clarify for folks, so that way folks are on the same page with us, when you're serving as a media buyer, that's for other companies, correct?
Not always.
Okay, so break that down.
You can do it for other companies as an employee. You can do it for other companies as a freelancer. You can do it for other companies as an agency. You can do it for your own company. I know people, including myself, who kind of where I'm heading now is about taking my skill set and building my own companies with them. So I could be a media buyer for my own thing. Or I have my own agency. I'm running ads. We have clients, but essentially like it's ways to look at it where it's not purely just always other companies. But for the most part, most people either they work for a company, they freelance, or they have an agency and they serve clients. So they are kind of doing that for them. But there are a lot of instances of media buyers who transition and take their skill set and say, I'm going to go build something and I'm going to leverage the skill set that I have, and then I'm going to build all the other pieces around me. So,
So just to put in folks, your legacy into context for folks, what is roughly like the amount of, I don't know if ad spend would be the appropriate term, but in terms of like spend related to campaigns that you've managed over the almost 20 years of media buying?
So my personal thing is about 130 million. I've coached and managed a lot of other people. I ain't really counting all of that. It's kind of hard to know. If I look at from a strategic standpoint, the number is far greater, but what I personally put my hands on, about 130 million in my career.
So we're putting that in perspective, because this is more than $5 a day for almost 20 years that we have. We know what we're doing.
Which ain't nothing wrong with $5 a day.
Ain't nothing wrong
start
with
campaigns still sometime at $5 a day when you testing. So
But so what's the most ad spend in a day that you've had experience with as a media buyer? Because I want people to understand the depth of your experience, because I think most people are used to the boost post or the person who like stood up the ad agency like overnight. I just wanted people to understand your experience that you're bringing to the conversation that we're getting ready to have.
On a single platform, 70,000 a day.
Okay.
On multiple platforms, over 100,000 a day.
Okay.
For sure. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Because some people are like, I'm trying to make 100,000 in a year. No, we're talking about spending 100,000 within a day
on a single platform, on a single account, too. Because we've had times where if you look at multiple accounts, multiple platforms. I don't even know. It could be a couple $100,000 a day, but on a single platform for a single account, 70,000 in a day.
Okay. All right. So we have a legend here with us, and who is going to break down the game. Let's first kind of start with like your philosophies around paid traffic. So when should someone start taking paid traffic seriously, or like, are there certain foundations that they should have in place before they start considering paid traffic?
To me, it's kind of two camps. If you have the capital to invest and you have the wherewithal to see through that day one, right? I know people who they on their second thing. They had an exit. Maybe they walked away with 20 million. Now they about to go do this other thing. They starting brand new. They starting at zero, but they ain't like the average person starting at zero. You know what I'm saying? So in that regard, that person, they might have the capital to see that through, because a lot of what you're doing initially is not going to work, with ads. Like, it's all about testing. I say this all the time. Testing is investing. If you're not testing, you're not investing in your business. You're not investing in being successful with advertising. So you got to go through that phase. But The other camp is people who they need the ads to work, maybe not immediately, but they don't have a lot of wiggle room to get it to work, if you will. Like they just need a higher likelihood of positive outcome in a shorter amount of time. So typically for me, when I'm looking at a person like that, I say, well, hey, are you selling the thing that you're selling consistently on a consistent basis? If you ain't doing that yet, the ads ain't gonna fix that. If you haven't figured out how to sell your thing yet, the ads ain't gonna fix that. Now, if you want to go run an ad for that, that's cool. But I would recommend taking advantage of what's available to you, your social media, direct messages, outreach. There's a lot of ways, joint ventures. There's a lot of ways to get an offer out in front of people and get that to work on a consistent basis. And if you haven't gotten there, probability of your ads being successful is going to be very low, because the key to ads, a legitimate media buyer or ads person will tell you, like, if the offer ain't good, they ain't going to be able to work a miracle. Your job is to kind of get that down first, so that when you go do the ads, you're not going in with an offer problem. You're just going with the other issues, but the offer problem is not one. And that's the biggest one. So that's kind of what I recommend. Like, figure out how to consistently sell your thing through other means. Speaking, right? It's a lot of ways to get in front of people to get, like, think about yourself. Like, before you start running ads, like, what were you doing to get your business moving, right? Before you start running ads.
Yeah. So one of the things that I talk about a lot is there's 3 ways to generate traffic, which obviously you know this. There's organic, there's partnership, and there's paid. And most people, they jump to paid too quickly.
Yep.
And they've underutilized organic and partnership.
100%.
And I think partnership is one of the most underrated sources of traffic. Where my kind of philosophy and belief is like, you need to tap out or reach what feels like a ceiling of organic and partnership before you start really playing in the paid traffic arena. Yep. And so that's what I hear you saying is how are you maximizing these other avenues of generating traffic? And by doing that, it's going to make sure that you have an offer that people want. Like, you're getting clarity on your messaging.
Yep.
Like, it allows you to really build the infrastructure of something that you could pour gas on.
Bingo.
And because, like you said, gas ain't going to fix your offer. Gas ain't going to fix your messaging. Gas is just going, you're putting it in a car with a bad engine and it can't go nowhere.
It's going to burn your money faster than you want to.
Exactly. I'm going to try and balance in this conversation, because I know we have people who are entering in the conversation at many different points.
True.
There are probably some people who have never run ads before. They're like, I'm brand new to ads. There are probably some people who are I've dibbled and dabbled in the ad space and I'm looking to just kind of build my muscle. And there's probably people who I'm running ads and I have some type of language around ads. So I'm going to try and balance the conversation to hit each one of those points. So for our people who have never ran ads before, what would you say are the attributes of a quality ad?
Of a quality ad? That's a great question. I mean, to me, again, you just said, when you're using these other avenues to get traffic, you're dialing in your offer, you're dialing in your messaging, all of those things. To me, a quality ad is being able to say the right thing to the right person. Now, targeting is how you get it in front of the right person, because sometimes you can say the right thing to the wrong person, right? So that's kind of where media buying comes in at, because that's what our role is. Our job as media buyers is to get in front of the right people and then make sure that we're saying the right thing. So to me, that's what a quality message is you're saying the right thing to the right person, and then you're getting that in front of that right person.
That makes me think about, I think, the other infrastructure that you were talking about of you got to know these things. You got to know who your audience is.
You got to know. You got to know.
Because if you don't know who your audience is,
you don't know who you're talking to. And if you don't know who you're talking to, how you know what to say to them?
Right. And which sounds so basic and foundational.
I know.
But so many people miss. So let's go here. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see people making with ads?
You just said it. They don't really know their audience. If you don't know your audience as good as they know themselves or better, I mean, go work on that. In order to sell a lot, you got to be able to understand what people really want to buy. At the end of the day, well, it's one thing to sell a lot, because there's people out here who sell a lot. People ain't happy, right? But to sell to a lot of people and the people to be happy to have given you money, you got to know how to solve their problems or their needs or desires. You got to really know that. You got to really truly understand that. So it's just a necessary evil. You have to do that. And if you don't do that, it's just everything kind of falls apart after that. To me, you don't know the right offer. You don't know the right message. You don't know who to show your ad to. It's so many things that are going to throw that all the way off. So we research. It's called research. And I think a lot of people, the biggest mistake a lot of people make is they just don't do deep enough research to understand their audience and how to serve them.
What's the entry point for the ad? So like, if people were going to tomorrow, like say, like run their first ad in their company, what's your opinion around what type of offer that they should be running an ad to? Like, should it be offer at a particular price point? Should it be at a particular part of the funnel? Like, what's your opinion around where to prioritize with driving paid traffic to from a funnel or offer standpoint?
That's a great question, but it's also a very loaded question. My answer is always like, don't try to reinvent the wheel. Like, what's already working? Remember what I said before, right? It's like, if you aren't consistently selling, you shouldn't be even trying to do ads in the first place. I mean, you can if that's what you want to do, but the probability of success is going to be a lot lower. If you want to increase your chance of success, you should already be consistently selling. So then what you should do is whatever you're selling consistently, what does that process look like? And then that's where you're going to start with what you already know, because now you can isolate the variables of these things happening in order for a sale to occur. You just need to figure out, how do I then advertise to that, right? It may be a webinar. It could be a demo call for people to get on and you demo your software. There's like a lot of ways people sell stuff. If you're consistently selling already, you know what that is. So then your job is just to figure out, how can I run an ad to get more people interested in my selling process versus like, go low ticket. Like, I don't really like to speak in absolutes because everybody's situation is different, which is why I go back to what you're already consistently selling. Let's start there. Let's take that and see if we can run ads to that and get that to work with ads, because we know the offer works. So we don't have an offer problem. We know we have a sales process that works. So that's not the issue. Then it's just a matter of, if your ads aren't working, it's probably some other things, but we can isolate those variables versus trying to say, oh, well, I'm going to go do a low ticket thing because I got this high ticket thing because Guru X said low ticket is where it's at, right? And it's like, people will say that, but you can't take these things in absolutes. You have to look at your own situation and do what's in the best interest of that. And typically that's what is already working. Let's leverage that. We want leverage. We want to take as much leverage into the scenario as possible instead of trying to start over from scratch and try to reinvent the wheel. Like, that's, people do it all the time, but it's just kind of like, it'd be a head scratcher for me, because it's just kind of like, why are you doing that? You know what I'm saying?
You know, I agree with what you say, and it like makes so much sense. I think what's hard for people is like, it really requires a mindset of the long game. It requires like patience. It requires like, you've got to test and be okay with just running multiple tests in order to like get closer to the answer. Because what I appreciate about you around like how you think about this space and think about just marketing and everything in general, where you're like, okay, but what's the number say?
That's it.
Like, you're like, what's the data say? Bingo. And I mean, it's so simple and so clear cut. And I think about like the mindset people have to have in order to really be driven by the data of like, you've got to depersonalize from it. You got to take your emotions out of it. And you got to be okay with playing the long game, because you're running a campaign, and the campaign, you're going to learn something.
Yeah, absolutely.
The hope is always you make money, but if you don't make money, it's not a complete fail. Or if you break even, it's not a complete fail. First off, what are your thoughts around boosting a post?
I mean, everything has its place. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to sit here and bash it. You know,
I mean, you giggled a bit, so.
I mean, you know, it's, you know, I don't know how you explain it, right? But it's baby steps. But it's, hey, look, I'd rather somebody come to me talking about ads and say, well, I tried this boost post thing and I'm just trying to figure out what's going on, than somebody's just like overthinking it and they did nothing, right? You know what I mean? So, you know, it's a strategy. There's a time and place for everything. I'm not a fan of boosted posts in the grand scheme, but if you ask any ads person, not even a media buyer, just somebody who, you know, do ads in their spare time, they gonna probably agree, like, you know, boost posts ain't really where it at. You know what I'm saying? But it has a purpose, right? You can boost posts to drive more engagement, and then you can build an audience of those people who engage and then show an ad to those people. So it's not like a boost post by itself. To me, is not a thing. But boosting posts in a strategy, that's absolutely a thing. We boost posts all the time just to build engagement, especially on like a new account. We can go in and do boost posts, and we can build out our engagement audiences, right? People who watch videos, people who like, comment, DM you, all of those things. Like whenever those activities are happening, you can be putting those people in audiences, and then you can come back around and advertise to people based on their engagement. Again, it ain't a direct path to money, but the likelihood of you converting someone who engaged with you already versus somebody that's not is a lot higher. So it has its place in that regard. But as a singular thing on its own, it's not really a thing to me. Yeah.
So just for our folks who are in that first bucket of like, I've never ran ads before, I don't know what ads are, because you said this term of engaged audiences, and just to be able to like illustrate that for folks, and please correct me if I misspeak anything, but on the back end of running an ad, because I don't think people understand that like the sophistication of ads that is required to run an effective ad campaign. Most people have the knowledge of a boost post where you just click a button. Most people don't understand the back end of an ad strategy where you are creating an audience, and then you are also, it's the creation of assets and aligning the creation of the assets to also the audiences, but there's also some experimenting and hypothesis that goes into what's the curation of the audiences, because you could be running multiple audiences. You could also have theories around, is your audience by certain demographics? Is it by certain age range, certain geographic areas? So there is so much strategy on the back end of running ads that when you're saying an engaged audience, I just want to make sure that people understand on the back end of running ads, it's actually, I'm creating an audience that I intend to send this ad to. So if you boost a post and people are engaging with it, now all these people can be added to this audience group that I'm then going to run another ad to. And I've intentionally, for lack of a better term, I'm targeting these people with my content. And so just wanted to illustrate that, because I found that most people don't understand that's what's happening on the back end of an ad, is that level of strategy. For people who have ran ads, I now want to get into this conversation of like, what should you be looking at? Like, what should you be monitoring from the effectiveness of an ads? And I know you're a numbers guy. And so what are the top, like, let's say 3 numbers or metrics that you look at if you open up an ads account and you're like, I'm trying to see if they have an effective ad strategy? What would be 3 metrics that you would look at?
It'll vary depending on your business model. KPIs, key performance indicators, typically 3, is a good number. 5, anything past 5, you're probably doing too much. But the number one thing I always do, and it's simple, right, is money in, money out. It's like, what did I spend? What did I make? That's the first thing I want to look at, right? On a macro level. And then what I'm trying to see on a micro level is, can I break that down in terms of where this spend went versus where this money came from, maybe from a campaign level or ad level or what have you, because now I'm trying to identify what is the highest leverage point that created this outcome. So, money in, money out, and then I'm going to look at either campaign level, it kind of depends, right? But it's like campaign level, traffic source level, ad level. That kind of, again, that's kind of like all one thing, but it's just kind of like, that's really what I want to see, because I want to try to break it down on that level. And then the third one would probably be more just like, I would probably have like group it all into like engagement, but like click-through rates and things of that nature matter, because that kind of can tell you, especially when you got an ad that convert, how many people clicking that from a click-through rate perspective, or if you got videos, we do a lot of video. So if I'm getting like a higher percentage of people consuming my content and they're converting, then I know that that's a great piece of content, because creative is really, in my opinion, it's probably 80% of the game now, because the algorithm's so smart. They're gonna go find the customers for you. So if you can say the right thing and get people to respond and convert, the algorithm is gonna read all of that, and they're gonna just go find more people like that and put it in front of, right? So that's kind of where I'm looking at engagement for, because I'm trying to see how is my messaging landing to my audience. So those would be kind of like the key things that I would look at. But the first thing is like money in, money out. If I ain't make no money, then I don't really know. I mean, again, like, yeah, if it's not working, I would try to identify why it's not working, but I would prefer to find something that did work and figure if I can extrapolate that and then leverage that further.
So when you say money in, money out, would you equate that to return on ad spend as an indicator, or
you can say that. I mean, it depends, right? What a lot of people don't realize is people don't buy in a linear fashion, right? This is the downside of ROAS, or return on ad spend. In my opinion, if you're too focused on that, is because people don't buy in a direct linear path. And a lot of times with advertising, attribution is more direct than it is the ecosystem or the journey of behavior, right? So for example, somebody can see your ad, click it, not do anything, go to Google, search you, find your website, leave there, go to YouTube, watch a podcast, come back to your funnel, and then buy. You see what I mean? So if your attribution is not on point, the algorithm, it's not going to pick up all of that. But your ad actually created the behavior. You just may not be evaluating it through that lens because you're ROAS driven and you're not looking at the bigger picture. Versus, like, we know if we spend more money on ads, you might see your overall revenue go up. Your ROAS might be a 3, but your business, you might be getting a 3x return on your advertising from through that lens, but your business as a whole is growing like way more. Well, why is that? Because a lot of times you're creating behavior that didn't exist before, that is making people do all of these other things, because folks just don't do things in linear fashion. So you have to kind of look at the totality of your business as well and try to figure out the impact ads is having on that, as well as that ROAS, which tends to be, and again, I don't like to speak in absolutes, but people tend to look at that in a narrow window versus looking at the totality of the picture. Because people who scale, like the type of people I work with that like really scale like big, they ain't as much focused on ROAS as they focus on LTV, and they're looking at the totality of the picture as a whole, because a lot of times we're not making money on day one. But they might be like, hey, I need to break even in 30 days because I know in 90 days or 120 days or 365 days or whatever it is, we might get a 3x return on that. Versus some people, like, you put $1 out today and they don't get $2 back, they about to lose it. People who really scale, that's a different mindset. You can't really think like that because it just don't really work like that. You really have to look at, every legit business, I say all the time, is like, you get people to buy and then you sell them more stuff. You show me a big business, I guarantee you they doing that. You show me somebody that got to get a new customer every time they need to make money, they business either dying or dead, right? So real businesses that get really big, they understand that I have to get a client or a customer and I have to sell them more things over time. And that's where you really make your money at. You don't try to make your money the minute you get somebody to buy through an ad. That's the beginning of the relationship. But a lot of people don't know these things, so they don't understand it. You know what I mean? So it's just a different way to look at it.
I'm sitting here like,
I feel like I went on a rant, but
no, but I'm like, the game that you just gave us though, because one of the things I talk about is like, what's the psychology of a millionaire, right? Yeah. Like, millionaires think a particular way. Absolutely. And you just named like the psychology of like the way that they think. It's the long game, right? Yeah. Where it's like, I'm making an investment that when I know my numbers, I can be able to predict how long it takes me to get my investment back and at what rate that I'm going to get my investment back. So I'm not focused on the investment on the front end. I'm focused on the return on the investment on the back end. And that's a mindset, right? Because some people have such a tight grip on money that they counting them every dollar that's going which is, it's real. It's so real. And what do you think, given your experience of seeing all these different businesses at different stages, what do you think is the pivot that you, because I imagine you've seen a business that was like at that stage and then like they pivoted into like, actually we're playing the long game. And so like, we're going to make this investment and see it on the back end. Like, what have you seen as like traditionally been kind of the cause underneath that mindset shift or pivot?
Man, that's a good question. So many people are so different. I just know the common thread is frustration of being stuck, really. It's just kind of like, I mean, I done seen people at 50 million a year and they frustrated because they feel like they stuck there. And I know that sounds crazy, but it's, take the 50 out of it. It's the idea of you're not growing, because if the business ain't growing, it's dying, right? So, different people have different, but that's kind of like the common theme of really just feeling stuck and feeling like you can't, get to the next, like you're trying to get to the next level and you're doing things and it's not happening. It's kind of rooted in that. And it doesn't matter if they're doing 50 million a year or 50,000 a year. That's kind of the place where you start looking for other means and other ways to get out of your own way, because you realize from a mindset perspective, I'm stuck because of me. I can't get unstuck because I don't know what I don't know. If you ain't never ran $1 million business before, you're not going to figure out how to run $1 million business in your head. But somebody else already had figured that out, right? So you get to a point where you realize, like, if you really truly want that, you're going to go seek out people who've done what you've done before, because you realize I'm trying to do something that I ain't never did. That's really what it boils down to, but it's typically because you're stuck and you feel like you're not getting where you want to go. And it could be because you did it before and you struggling to get there, or most of the time it's because you haven't done it before and you're trying to do something you haven't done before.
One of the numbers Facebook from on the ads manager dashboard will spit out will be cost per lead, CPL. Is there a cost per lead that you think is too high? I know you're gonna say it depends. If it does depend, like how do you evaluate when your cost per lead is too high?
It's all about what is the lead worth. I only care about the value of the lead versus the cost. If you tell me how much your lead costs and you tell me it's too high, the first thing I'm gonna ask you is, like, how much is it worth? If you can't tell me how much it's worth, then you can't tell me that it's too high. I mean, that's just what it is. I mean, I don't know how to, it sounds very simple, but I understand that it's not. But I'm just saying, like, that it always goes to, well, what is a lead worth? How can you tell me it's too high? What are you comparing too high to? And if you compare it to anything other than the value, I'm gonna be like, okay, well, that you shouldn't be considering it high based on that analogy. It should be based on, because I have a confidence around the value of the lead. So now I know what a cost is. Now I can say it's too high or not. Without that data, you're just guessing, really.
And when you say value, because you use the acronym before, LTV, lifetime value.
Correct.
Is that the indicator that you think people should be using to evaluate the value of a lead, or would you say something else?
That's a really good question. I'm trying to figure out this simple way to answer that without going too down the rabbit hole, because it's like there are businesses out here who, making millions of dollars and they ain't thinking through no lens of LTV. You know what I mean? Like, that's just not on their radar. It's just not something that you can be very successful and not be purely focused on LTV, because LTV is a time thing. That's why the word time is in there, right? If your business is 2 years old, like, how do you really truly know what the LTV is? Typically, you're not gonna really establish that till your business is longer and longer. So the younger your business is, it's harder to go off of LTV. You have to kind of look at the scenario that you're in and try to, just collapse everything into, where am I right now? Based on, if I did everything that I could do, how much revenue could I generate from these leads? And then you take that amount and divide it by the number of leads, and that's your value. You don't really have that advantage because you ain't been around long enough, if you will. You see what I'm saying? So it's really more about just like looking at your situation and just, try to take everything that you can possibly do and try to figure out, what is the value I made from the leads that I generated. And then you can do a basic math equation of just taking that value and divide it by the number of leads, and there go your value.
I've never heard anyone make the analogy, which it totally makes sense. I've just never heard anyone say, like, LTV is directly related to the lifetime of your business.
Absolutely.
Like, and so if you've had a short lifetime.
That's why it's called lifetime value, right? It's like.
It makes so much sense, but I just had never thought about the fact that it's like, you're almost at a disadvantage the younger your business is when it comes to lifetime value, because you're only going off of the lifetime of your business, so if you're in the first, 2 to 3 years of business, then that indicator is not as a quality data point as maybe some other indicators.
Which is why people be looking at their competitors and They a year-old business and they've been around 15 years. Y'all ain't the same.
Mm-hmm.
You can't try to build your business and model exactly off of somebody who, you should be focused more on people who are more like you that consider your competitors. If you're trying to model from and learn and apply things that you see, because some businesses are applying things that they have certain leverage points that you don't have. And if you don't understand what's going on in that business, you're going to just be applying those things blindly and you're going to be wondering why it ain't working for you.
Mm-hmm. For our last bucket of folks who they've run ads, they're like, you know, in the thick of ads, and they're like, what does it look like for me to just continue build my muscle in this ad game? You were starting to kind of go this direction in the conversation. I'd be curious to hear more about it, because you've seen businesses at many stages. Like,
I agree.
You've seen businesses at 7 figures, you've seen 8 figures, you've seen 9 figures. And so what would you say would be some of the mindsets or differences in terms of like strategy when it comes to scaling to 8 and 9 figures, when it comes to, and it could be general in business, it also, you know, in connection to ads, like what would you say would be some of those differentiators from a mindset and or strategy standpoint for the 8-9 figure businesses?
You could get to $1 million business without a lot. And I know that's loaded and people say it. I've personally done it, and I have countless examples of that where you don't need a ton to pull that off. Typically, when you get into about the 8-figure level, it becomes the people you surround yourself with. It really becomes your team in the aspect of not necessarily executive level talent, but just, you know, high producing talent. And when you start talking in the 9-figure range, that's when your team becomes more than just the people on the organizational chart. That's when you start talking about, you know, some people have boards. Some people have, maybe they have a mentor, or they have investors, or, you know, if you don't want to do investors, like you're starting to tap into something that's, you know, like an executive level team. And then you starting to tap into like these different levels of team. Because when you say team, like it's levels to that. You can outsource a team. You can have an outsourced team and make $1 million. But to get to 8 figures, the probability of you being a single person and having a bunch of folks outsourced to you to get to that, it's possible, but not likely, right? And then when you start talking multiple 8, 9 figures, you start looking at executive level. You're starting to see, you know, CFOs and COOs and, you know, all of that type of stuff. I'm talking about like really high, you know, like people who really are at that type of level. You're starting to see, you know, mentors or boards and things of that nature where you're starting to you're tapping into people who, you know, see what it is you're doing. Maybe they have a vested interest in you, or maybe they have a vested interest in your business, or some combination. And you're starting to see those leverage points happening when you start getting to that level, because at those bigger levels, like it's really like an executive level. It's kind of like a suite of people. Suite of really high level people that you're dealing with, versus like 8-figure businesses. I see people making 20, 30 million a year with having one high level person and a bunch of just, you know, assassins. You know what I'm saying? Just killers, like people just gonna go out and just crush. But when you start, you know, leadership is really what it is. Like when you start getting to 8, 9 figures, it's really leadership. It's really kind of where it boils down to. What level of leadership are you and the people you have on your top level? That's where you'll see people take investors, maybe because they don't need the money, but they want access to that leadership. They want access to, you know, things that they wouldn't otherwise have. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of how you have to generalize it, right? Because nothing's exact. There's always exceptions to the rule, but generally speaking, that's what I see.
It makes total sense. And I mean, my brain goes like to a school where it's like running a classroom and running a school and running a district. Like those are three different things, 3 totally different things. And what it takes at each one of those levels, to your point, it's like leadership, where it's like you need a great teacher at the classroom level, which is leadership. At a school level, you need a great principal. And from a district level, you need a great executive cabinet, you need a great school board, and you need a great superintendent. And so it totally makes sense. This was so good. I feel like I had the opportunity to kind of like nerd out a bit.
Yeah.
And for someone who like, someone else who understands numbers and thinking about strategy in this way, I just really appreciate you taking the time to be able to stop by and be able to share your wisdom and expertise with the audience. Any like kind of final words that you would want to share from an ad standpoint or from a business standpoint in general with the audience?
I'm more of a strategy person. I'm like, measure twice, cut once type of guy. So I just think people don't strategize enough. They don't maximize their strengths, and be honest with yourself about, what are you good at and what you're not good at. And, I see so many people who, including myself, with a lot of weaknesses, but can be very successful because we just max out on the strengths. And then we be honest with ourselves and it's like, you know what? I'm maxed out on my strengths. I need to go find somebody, that's stronger than me at these other areas that's holding me back. I'm in my own way, right? Being honest with yourself is another like really important thing. And I think if people just, be honest with themselves and, look at what their strengths are and lean into that, that can take you really far. But at some point, you're going to be the bottleneck. And you got to be willing to admit that you're the bottleneck and be willing to ask for help, which is a pride thing that I went through that, right? Back in the days of my career where it's just pride. I wasn't willing to say I was struggling and, I hit ceilings, and until I was able to tell people who I knew could help me, like, hey, this is what I'm struggling with, I started breaking through levels. So I saw that in my own life, and that held me back for many, many years, just the pride, you know what I'm saying, or whatever, like emotion, right? Just letting emotion get the best of me, even though I'm a numbers guy. I'm human too, right? So that's what I would say. I just think people should, be more strategic, maximize the strengths that they have, be honest with themselves, pay attention to the signs, because typically when you hit a ceiling, you're probably the bottleneck. That's just what it is,
So good. Y'all, I know, I'm not even gonna say I hope, I know you got lots of great things from this episode. And so share with a friend, because we dove into, this is not even, I'm about to change the name. This is about to be 8-Figure, 9-Figure Educator Podcast, okay? Given this conversation, like this is next level type of strategy, next level type of psychology that we were breaking down during this episode. So please, please, please share it with a friend, because I know that they would get value from this conversation. And while you're at it, go ahead and hit the subscribe button so that way you know when the next episode drops on the Seven Figure Educator Podcast. I'll see you next week with a new episode.